I am Michael Severo, an interviewer for the Berkeley Historical Society. Today is November 9th, 2022. I am interviewing Millie Chazin, who is in Berkeley, on Zoom. I would like to start the interview by finding out a little about your parents. Could you tell us about your parents, your mother and father, and where their names, what were their names, where they were born, where they lived, something about their family, including sibs, and if they were from Europe, tell us about their journey to the United States.
Yeah, my parents are Rebecca Sclar, was my mother, and my father is Abraham Becker, and Rebecca Sclar, my mother, came from Lumza, Poland, and she came in 1921, and it's a very interesting story that you read when you were at my house. She and 5 other siblings were living there, and she had another sibling who had emigrated to the United States 6 or 7 years earlier. And my mother and her 5 other siblings became orphans when she was perhaps about 16 years old. And her mother died of childbirth, and her father died of typhoid fever. And there was an epidemic at that time. And my mother also had typhoid fever, but she recovered. So there she was. She was the oldest of 5 other siblings. And she had to, find a way to earn some money so they could eat. And it was, very hard. And she used to go to the market and get bread from a bakery and sell bread in the market to earn a little money to support those kids. But anyway, so that was very hard. And her older sister, who was already in the United States, and her husband started to sponsor them, and they initiated the process of bringing them to America. And it took about a year, I think, until all the papers were signed, and till they got to the United States. And
I'm going to show you a picture. Can you see that?
yes.
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 One that you allowed me to make a copy of.
Yes.
So this where was this taken? This was taken in Europe, right?
Yes, in Lumza, Poland. Yeah.
And
lived. In fact, my son and I went there about 5 years ago. We took a trip to Poland. went to that town, and we went. I think I knew where they lived because my mother told me a lot of things about Europe and where they lived, and she said they lived right by the river there, and we went over. I don't remember the name of that river, but anyway, we went to Lumsa, Poland, and went over right near the river, and I could imagine, there are different houses there now, but I could imagine
Yeah.
where they lived. So
So,
anyway,
wh-
yeah.
what did, okay, that
The
is,
siblings.
th-
He had two brothers, and one of the brothers on the left there um, was drafted into the Polish army, and this was during World War One, and he he was in the Polish army and fought against the Germans, and he was the Germans used poison gas at that time, and so anyway, he was not with them when they immigrated to America. Um, they were hoping he would come home from the war, and they didn't know he was poisoned. And so, and they wanted to wait for him, but they didn't. They couldn't wait because they had to go get to the ship to immigrate. And
so,
so they left without him. And after they came to the United States about 6 months later or so, they received a letter from somebody back home in Lumsd telling them that he had come home and he was very sick, and then eventually he had passed away. And they had buried him in the Jewish cemetery there and sent a picture of his gravestone. So that's, yeah,
so,
that his name is Haskell. That's her sister, my aunt. Her name is Fega, and that's my uncle, and his Jewish name is Mordechai, and in English they called him Morris, and that's my grandmother, and her
and
name
she,
was Nechama, and the nickname that um, is Neche, which that's my middle name, and the one next to my grandmother her name was Yenta. In English, we called her Jenny. That's my grandfather. His name was Pesach or Paul, and that's my Aunt Bella, and she was part of a twin, and the twin died, and she survived. Uh, and then the one in the middle her name was Shirley in English, Shana in Yiddish. And then the little one there didn't make it. Her name was Simila or Sima, and Simila means little Sima. So, yeah.
so your grandmother died during childbirth,
Yes.
and your grandfather died, or your grandfather died from some pandemic or something,
Yeah, typhoid fever.
typhoid.
Yeah.
So did the ones who, your aunts and uncles, when they came to the United States, did they come as a group or do they?
Yes, they all came as a group.
They did.
Yes. Yeah. They all came together. Yeah.
Okay. And when they came to the United States, where did they move to?
Well, they kind of, the two youngest ones, Bella and Shirley, um, went to live with my oldest aunt in Brooklyn. My aunt lived in Brooklyn, I believe in Williamsburg, but I'm not sure. And because they were, very young and they were eligible to go to school, to elementary school. Whereas the others were already like eligible. I think they were eligible to work. I think they were over 16,
Hmm.
I think, by then. And so they went to work. They got jobs in the garment industry, all of them. My mother had a job sewing pockets into men's suits.
Hmm.
That's what her job was. Um, my uncle had a more skilled job where he cut out the patterns of suits for men. And my aunt Faggy, I'm not sure exactly what her job was, but all of them worked in I think she did some kind of a sewing. The whole family worked, in the garment industry.
How about
Yeah,
your paternal family? What is
okay.
their story?
Yeah. Yeah, my father came from the Ukraine, from Eastern Ukraine, uh, called the town. It was a very tiny town. A shtetl is a small town in Eastern Ukraine near Poland, and his family were tailors. His father was a tailor, and I'm not sure. My father was about 21 when my grandfather immigrated first. My father was the oldest, and then he had three sisters, and his oldest sister was named Molly or Miriam in Hebrew, and then he had a sister Frida, and then his youngest sister was Ethel, and my father was the oldest, and there were four of them, four children. There were other children, but they had died, in infancy or
Mhm.
died young. My grandfather was a tailor, and my grandmother, I think, stayed home as usual, in those days. And so my grandfather immigrated about in 1914. He went on his own. He went by himself, and he wanted to be in the United States, but he couldn't get papers to immigrate to the United States. And so he went to Canada, and he immigrated to Montreal, Canada, and he worked there for a couple of years. Um, I'm not exactly sure, you know, I know it was some kind of either he worked at sewing furs or sewing other garments. I'm not sure. Um, but he really wanted to come to the United States. I think he had some relatives, that lived in the United States. And eventually he crossed the border and got into the United States and uh, got work in the garment industry also,
Mm.
and earned enough money to bring the family over to,
Mm.
and so they also came. My father and his three sisters and mother uh, came in also 1921 because
Mm.
that was the cutoff for immigration in those days. After that,
Mm.
United States was not accepting anyone from Eastern Europe.
Mhm.
So yeah, so they came and that's my grandmother and grandfather.
Mhm.
And my grandmother's name, I'm named after her. Her name is Matel, and I don't know if it's Yiddish or Russian or what, but that's what her name was. And her maiden name was Garber, and my grandfather's name was Moshe or
Mm.
Moshe or Morris or Murray, but in
Yeah.
Hebrew it's Moshe Becker. His
Mhm.
last name was Becker. And so, yeah, then those are the only photos I have
Mm.
of my
Mm.
paternal
Mm.
grandparents.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, tell us about your parents' lives in the United States. Uh, when did your parents get married? What did they do for their occupation? Where did they live? Um,
Yeah. Okay, so um, I my parents, my mother, she hung out with a group of immigrants. She had a lot of immigrant friends, and um, my father was a very quiet person, not too aggressive, um, and he was, I guess, getting on. He was kind of older to be, in the old days, people got married when they were very young. And my father was a little older, and I don't know. I think there was some kind of some friends, it was like a match. uh, and some friends introduced them. And I guess they courted for a while and they got married in 1928. And yeah, and that's a picture of their wedding. And the Jewish immigrants that came here believed in having big weddings, fancy weddings. And here's an example. And yeah, so yeah, those are my parents.
so what is this?
Well, it's, let me see if I could remember, a ketubah, I think it's called in Hebrew. And it's a marriage certificate, a Jewish marriage certificate. And
And
and I so it just shows the date that they got married, who got married, and there are a couple of witnesses there. I see on the bottom. Um, Morris Schneer, who was a friend of my father's. I can't make out that other one that's written in Yiddish. The print is too small. Uh, I don't know.
Yeah.
So my parents lived in the in the Lower East Side. But they when they got married, they moved up to the Bronx. Both of them had worked for a number of years and saved money, and they were able to afford a nice move into a pretty new apartment building, and I would say it's the Central Bronx, and so that's where I was born.
It wasn't the Grand Concourse.
No, not far from the Grand Concourse. You could walk there, I think, but uh, it was Fulton Avenue. It was called, and it was right next to this huge park, beautiful park. It had a swimming pool. It had gardens. It had a lot of lawn, grassy areas, and play where you could pay. What did they call it again?
And then
Certain kind of balls where you slap a paddle against the wall. Anyway, it had, or you could play basketball. There were places where you could do some sports. Anyway, and so I was born on the eastern end of that park. There was a maternity hospital there, and that's where I was born.
which one was it?
It was actually, it was called Crotona Park Sanitarium, but it really wasn't a sanitarium, for TB or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was the name of it. It was a maternity hospital, and that's where I was born. And I was born on June 24th, 1931. So, yeah.
And where did you go to school?
So I was born right in the middle of the Depression, and we didn't live very long in that nice new building. And my father, they moved to another apartment on the other side of the park, and so and then my brother was born 3 years later in this place on 170th Street. And at that time, my father he had a dress shop in the garment industry. And I think I told you the story that his partner ran off with the money and left my father to be responsible to pay off whatever debts they had. And it was very devastating to my father. And so he lost his dress business that he was in, and he was out of work. He was unemployed for more than a year, maybe a year and a half or so. And it was very hard on us, and we couldn't. At that time, I was like in third grade, and I went to public school too. I started there. It's called PS2 in the Bronx. And then I got my parents had to move to a very cheap, a place where the rent was very low. And so at that, during that time, I went to three schools. I was in three different schools in third grade until finally my father and his sister helped him, and his brother-in-law helped him to get purchase a grocery store in the very lower East Bronx on this 160th Street near Third Avenue in the Bronx. And they ran this grocery store for many years, like 20 years or so. And so, yeah, that's where I went to elementary school, and then I went to junior high, and I went to PS10 in the Bronx, and that went all the way up to eighth grade, I think. I went through eighth grade in PS10 in the Bronx. It was an all-girls school. And in those days, and my brother went to a boys' school. They separated the girls and the boys. And so anyway, from there, I went on to high school. I went to, oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah, that picture is when I was, I must have been about 4 or 5.
this is you?
This is me right there on the bottom. Yeah.
And who's
that's
that?
my cousin.
Oh,
That's an older cousin who was about 10 years older than me, or a lot older than me. And that's my father. And this is one of my aunts, my Aunt Jenny. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I went to James Monroe High School in the Bronx. And we lived in a neighborhood that was kind of mixed, and my mother was she was somewhat of a racist and didn't want me to go to the high school that was in our district, because there were Black people and Puerto Rican people there, and so she took my aunt's address, who lived in the far East Bronx, and I went to a mostly white high school, although there were also some other ethnic groups there going. But I was in a special class. It was like an honors class in New York. They segregated the kids, and kids who were good students were in one class. We stayed in one class. And yeah, that was my high school class. And I went all the way through high school with the same kids.
so is that you?
The bangs, it's like 1, 2, 3, fourth over. I had bangs.
Oh,
there.
this one?
That one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That looks
And,
like
and this is a class?
This is a class picture. I think it was a graduation. That was my graduating class. Yeah.
From high school?
From high school. Yeah. Yeah. And I graduated in June 1948.
And
Yeah.
where did you go to college?
I went to the City College of New York, and you had to take an exam to get in there. You had to pass a test, and I passed, and that's how I was but college was free, no tuition. We just had to pay for our books
Huh. Yeah.
and maybe some registration fees.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have never gone to college. My
Yeah.
parents
Yeah.
would couldn't afford it, and they didn't believe that women should go to college anyway. My mother didn't believe. They said she always told me, and she gave me a hard time when I was going to college. She told me I should be going to work, that only boys should go to college.
Mm.
That was her philosophy. Yeah.
So what did you major in?
Well, when I was kind of forced into going into education because when I wanted to go to City College very badly. I could have gone to another college, Hunter College, which
Mm.
was all girls, and I didn't have much of a social life when I went to high school because I didn't live where the school was located. So I didn't have any social life with any of the kids in school.
Mm.
So I was really hungry for a social life. And so and so I thought a city college would be better, you
Mm.
know,
Mm.
for a social life. And there was a lot of activity going on in city college. It was very
Mm.
well known for all kinds of activities, especially political.
Mm. Mm.
But I didn't really go there for that reason. Uh, and at that time, the only thing a girl could major in was education.
Uh,
Like I wanted to be an accountant, but I wasn't allowed to take those classes.
mm.
I had to go into education. So that's what I did.
So uh, after you graduated, what did you do for employment?
Uh, well, I was employed while I was going to school. For one
Oh.
year, the second year, my mother refused, my mother didn't allow me to go to college during the day. She said, you have to go to work. So I got a job with an insurance company and I worked as an accounts clerk.
Mm.
And I just, I was in charge of certain accounts uh, at this insurance company. And I went to school at night. When I first started City College, I was looking for, a social life, and I went to this dance that City College sponsored. It was called the Friday Night Dances, and I went with a couple of friends of mine, and we went to this dance, and some guy asked me to dance, and he really liked the way I danced. And that was my future husband. I met my husband at this Friday night dance. So I met him when I was like a freshman in college, and he was a second year student. He was 1 year ahead of me. And when I met him, that was it. Fell in love with me right away as soon as he saw me. All right. So, uh, and I did all kinds of things with my husband. My husband was a lefty politically, and yeah. So, yeah, before we got married, though, he introduced me to his organizations that he belonged to, and one of them was an organization, was a lefty organization, but it was an organization of Yiddish-speaking kids, um, young people that were had learned, uh, came from families that were very interested in maintaining the Yiddish language and culture. And
Mm.
and my husband joined that group too. He was interested in that also, and he brought me into it. And it
Mm.
was part of a national organization called the International Workers Order, and then they had different sections of ethnic groups. So they had sections of Russians and
Mm.
Ukrainians and Jews and other, ethnic groups.
Mm.
So it was called the Jewish People's Fraternal Order, and then they had a youth groups, and so the youth group was called the Jewish Young Fraternalists,
Mm.
and that's the group my husband belonged to, and he brought me in there, and um, we would get together every, I don't know, very frequently, every week or two, there'd be something going on, and we'd be singing, we'd be dancing, uh, and then there were like drama groups, and
Mm.
later on there was a chorus, a youth chorus, and uh, so lots of cultural
Mm.
activities uh, related to Yiddish.
Yeah.
And I liked that because I knew Yiddish. My parents, that was my first language.
Mm.
And, my parents spoke Yiddish at home, and that's what I heard at home. And
Mm.
unfortunately, when I started school, um, I kind of I learned English and I spoke English, even though they spoke to me in Yiddish. I spoke to them in English,
Mm.
and I kind of not, didn't keep up speaking Yiddish, but I
Mm.
understood every single word. The women, my mother's sisters, are all there. Uh, and of course, they married, so these are their husbands.
Mm.
But I think one of my cousins are there. No, I
Mm.
think it's just the older generation.
Mm.
Yeah, looks like, well, one of my aunts is not there. My Aunt Bella,
Mm.
I see. Yeah. But my mother, and this is Faggy and Shirley and Jenny, and I don't know who that is. I
Mm.
can't see.
Mm.
And,
So,
I'm not sure who that was.
so,
That's my father, and that's
what,
Shirley's husband, my Uncle Izzy. This is my father, the one on the front on the right.
oh, this one.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my
Okay.
father. Yeah.
So you said that you used to, your family would have every weekend, every Sunday, a meal.
Song fest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would have dinner. It was like it really wasn't a dinner, it was a dairy meal. It
Mm.
wasn't no meat,
Yeah.
and they would take turns having it in different houses. But
Mm.
this Aunt Shirley over there, she was a big hostess, so she had it a lot.
Mm.
And after we ate, we get together and they would start singing because one of my aunts was a really good singer. This one here,
Which one? This one?
up here on the top. on the right. Yeah. And this guy too was a very good singer.
This would,
Yeah, my uncle Izzy. And so we they would get it started, you know. They would start singing and everybody else would join in. And you know, if the kids were around, there are no kids over here, but
yeah,
you know, my cousins were around, they sang too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did you sing?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So,
It was
so,
fun. I mean, you know, it was before TV, you
yeah,
know. There was no TV. We had a radio, but
yeah.
we had to
So,
entertain ourselves. They
you
played a
said,
lot of cards too,
yeah.
card games.
So you said that the songs you sang were Yiddish songs, right?
Yeah, Yiddish and some Russian too.
Ah,
Yeah,
mm,
yeah, they sang a couple of Russian
mm.
songs too. Yeah.
So when later on you were or are a member of the San Francisco Yiddish folk chorus,
Yes.
and does the chorus sing any of the songs that you used to sing around the table?
Yes. Yes, of course.
Uh,
And also, yes, many. In fact, I went to a rehearsal last night and sang a number of songs that I used to sing when I was
mm,
young. Yeah,
mm.
yeah.
So tell us about your journey to Berkeley. What did you, how did you end up
That
in
was a long journey. Yeah.
Berkeley?
There was a lot going on in between. Yeah. I just wanted to say that when I was young, my parents took me to Yiddish theater. There was a lot of Yiddish theaters on Second Avenue in New York, and they took me, and I remember those theater productions. I was about 7 or 8 or 9 years old, or pretty young, but I remember them. There was, you know, famous actors that, you know, Jewish actors that I saw on stage when I
Yeah.
was a kid.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah, it was very memorable.
oh,
Some things stick out in my
oh,
memory. That's
yeah.
one of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did you end up in Berkeley? What, from the Lower East, oh no,
That
from the Bronx.
journey. Yeah. Uh, I so yeah. After I met my husband, and we moved to Buffalo, New York, from New York City, and my husband didn't have really, he was not prepared to be a professional, even though he had a degree in sociology. Uh, he didn't do anything with it. He was not able to. And so he had us, I got pregnant the first year that we were married. And so I had my first child in 1951. We were married in 1950. And so, he had to earn some money to support our family. And so he worked in various industries in Buffalo. He worked at auto industry and the steel industry, because that was the big thing in Buffalo. And he did that for a number of years. But there were, it was not, it was not a good thing to do. I mean, he felt not fulfilled, you
mm,
know. When he went to a very prestigious high school and Peter Stuyvesant High School in New York, which was like one of the top schools, and he decided he's going to change. He's going to go back to school, and he wanted to become a chemist. So he quit working in the steel industry, and he was getting laid off, and there was strikes, and it wasn't
mm.
steady work anyway. And I had to go to work when he was not working, just to support the family. And so I had, after I had my first child in 1951, and then 3 years later, I had another kid, a son. And anyway, our family was growing. And but he decided he's going to go back. Yeah, that's my first one. And that's when I first moved up to Buffalo.
Mm.
That's my mother. No, I think that's before we moved.
Millie,
Before we moved, um, I was living with my mother. We didn't even have an apartment to live in.
yeah,
And I was living with my mother-in-law, and
yeah,
my husband was a leftist, and he got, he was
yeah,
involved politically. He had a hard time after he got his degree in chemistry. He was on the blacklist. He It was the time of McCarthy, and
mm,
McCarthy affected us a lot
mm,
because of mainly his political activities.
mm,
Um, and so while, and it was the time that the House Un-American Activities Committee was going around. It was the tail end of it, but
mm,
they happened to come to Buffalo, and my husband was called by the committee, and that was uh, not good.
mm,
It was a bad time for us, and so I guess, if and he didn't cooperate with them. He didn't tell them anything because all the committee wanted to know is, who do you know?
mm,
Who uh, they were looking for other people who were leftists or communists, or they
mm,
would just wanted names. And
yeah,
so my husband didn't tell them anything. He didn't cooperate with
mm,
them. But it was caused him to be blacklisted. So
yeah,
after he got his degree, at the University of Buffalo, he couldn't get he couldn't get a good paying job.
yeah,
He was blacklisted, and one of the good jobs that he was finally offered a job at Corning Glassworks. Uh, he we were so happy we were going to move there, and we were looking for a place to live, and all of a sudden he gets a letter in the mail. They rescinded the job
mm,
offer, and
mm,
they didn't want him anymore because apparently, the FBI used to go around checking on people and finding
yeah,
out
yeah,
what they're doing, and telling employers that you know
mm,
this guy belonged to such and such organization, and this guy
yeah,
belonged to this one, and that's what happened.
yeah.
So he didn't get that job. So we stayed in Buffalo a while longer, and he finally got a job with St. Regis Paper Company, which is in West Nyack, New York, not
Mhm.
far from New York City. It was in Rockland County, and there, the person who hired him happened to be a Jewish guy, so he was very sympathetic to us,
Mm. Yeah.
and he didn't care, what his politics were.
Yeah.
Didn't bother him, and so he got a job doing some research in doing on in paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so he did that for a number of years. Um, he got another job, and my husband kept wanting to, earn more money and get a better position, and so every 5 years he would change his job. So
Mhm.
from from West Nyack, New York, we moved to Rumford, Maine, where
Mm.
he got another job with a paper company, and we lived there for 5 years. And
Mm.
then after that, he decided I'm not working for companies anymore because he saw the pollution that the paper does to the water and to the air. It was terrible when live near a paper company. The air pollution was
Mm.
terrible. The water pollution was terrible, and so my husband decided I'm going on the other side. I'm going to work for the environment. I
Mm.
want to improve the environment. And so he applied for a job with the Department of Natural Resources in Madison, Wisconsin.
Mm.
Uh, so we moved there,
Mm.
and he had a really, responsible job there.
Mm.
And he was in charge of monitoring the air in the whole state of Wisconsin. And
Mhm.
and we lived there for 23 years. We lived in Madison and
Mm.
suburbs there. I had I had 3 kids already, and
Mm.
they grew up. They had grown already, and I became an elementary teacher, and I worked in Yonkers, New York for a number of years, and then when I moved to Maine, I got another job in Maine as an elementary school teacher. And while I was in Maine, I had kids in my class who had special needs, and there were no programs in Maine for kids with special needs. And I tried to teach them in my classroom, but it was very hard. And I decided, I'm going to go in. I want to learn about these special
Mm.
needs kids. And,
Mm.
I think they need a special program.
Mhm.
And it was just the beginning of special ed programs in those days. And I started taking classes in special ed. And then
Mm.
when we moved to Madison, I continued. Uh, I went for my master's degree
Mm.
in special ed at the University of Wisconsin because
Mm.
my youngest one was already starting college. I had no kids in the house anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, so I got my degree in special ed and got a job eventually I worked in special ed for 20 years in Madison, in
Mm,
Wisconsin. I wasn't in Madison. I worked
mm,
in a rural district
mm.
there. And yeah.
From Madison, did you
And
move to Berkeley?
Madison, we stayed in Madison until we both retired.
Yeah.
My husband retired in 1994, and I retired in 1996. And I had two sons in California.
Uh,
I had one in the Bay Area here in Berkeley, and I had one in San Diego.
mm,
And we had a choice. And my my husband wanted to go to San Diego. It was nice there, you know. I said, and I wanted to come here. But of course, I gave in. Of course, I gave in to him, and we moved to San Diego. And my son Walter, who is a research scientist, he became a research scientist, and he worked for Scripps Research in San Diego for many years. But then he got an offer at Vanderbilt University to build a nuclear magnetic resonance machine there. and he was in charge of building this new structure at Vanderbilt University. Plus, he's a professor of chemistry there.
yeah, yeah,
So he got a big job there.
yeah,
And he's still there now.
yeah.
And so they moved to Nashville. We lived in San Diego for 12 years. And
Mm,
my husband um, didn't take care of his health
mm,
very much. He was overweight, and he had some heart problems and knee problems.
yeah,
And his knee was so bad that he couldn't walk the stairs in the condo that we lived
yeah,
in, and we had to move there to an apartment. And um, anyway, he
mm,
decided he was going to have knee replacement surgery.
yeah. So,
He had the knee replacement surgery, and because of his heart problems, he wasn't supposed to have general anesthesia.
yeah. Oh,
But the so the spinal didn't work.
okay.
They couldn't get it
Yeah,
in his spine. It didn't
yeah,
work. So they gave him general anesthesia, and
yeah,
it did him in. It it affected, his
yeah,
heart. Because he had
yeah.
some stents and he had blood clot in his. He got very sick.
So,
Got
did,
very sick, and he never fully recovered. He did
yeah,
recover eventually,
yeah,
but he could never. He was in a wheelchair.
yeah,
Never could walk properly.
yeah. So, at that time, what year did you move to Berkeley?
So and this was in 2010.
Oh, okay.
Okay, he had his surgery in
Yeah,
29, I think,
okay.
2009, and I couldn't. He was so sick, and
Yeah,
I needed my family.
yeah, right,
I had
right.
family here,
Yeah,
so that's why I
yeah,
moved. He was in assisted living. He never
mm,
came home
mm,
to live, in our
yeah,
because I couldn't take
yeah,
care of him.
yeah,
I was already getting older too,
yeah,
and
So,
I had a bad back, and
yeah,
he was a big guy, and I just knew I couldn't take care of him.
yeah,
So he was in rehab for a while, and
yeah.
then
So,
assisted living, and in
oh, how,
fact, was even in memory care because he had that anesthesia got him
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
He was hallucinatory and all that. He was very sick for a
Yeah.
whole year,
Oh,
and that's when we moved up here.
yeah. How did you hear about the Yiddish Conversation Group at the JCC?
Okay, so while we were living in San Diego, and I was retired, and I was looking for something to do, some hobby, something that would interest me. And I started getting interested in Yiddish again. And
Mm,
even before we moved, um, I guess when we were in San Diego, I heard of this International Association of Yiddish Clubs.
mm,
And anyway, there was a Yiddish group at the JCC in San Diego.
mm,
And I joined that group. And so that's how I got started. And then I heard about these Yiddish conferences that were every year there was one in a different city. And my husband and we were very, I was, and I got him interested too. And we used to
mm,
go, we went to about 4 or 5 different Yiddish conferences every year in a
mm,
different city. One time in Cleveland, one time in New Jersey,
mm,
uh, one time it was right here in the Bay Area in San
mm,
Francisco, and
mm.
anyway,
Yeah. So,
so um, and that's what I learned a lot about Yiddish. I learned a lot about the history of Yiddish
mm,
and some of the writers and the
yeah,
language. Also, I went to the sessions where they spoke Yiddish. There were sessions in English and sessions
mm,
Yiddish, but I chose the ones
yeah.
where I could hear Yiddish.
Did, so,
So
how was your Yiddish after all these years? Did it?
it was like I said, I understood everything, and I was getting there. Not
Yeah.
very good. In San Diego, the leader of our Yiddish group was a Yiddish teacher.
Uh,
She used to teach children Yiddish. She was from Mexico City,
mm,
and so she was pretty tough.
mm,
So she was not so happy the way I spoke Yiddish.
mm.
I didn't meet her standards. But anyway, we had skits and we did it in Yiddish. We had little skits that we did all the time, and it was fun. And we sang songs. We had a person who played the piano, and so it was fun.
The period between San Diego and I guess the eastern part of the United States. Did you ever use Yiddish or speak it? I mean, did you talk?
You know,
No.
when my kids were growing, my husband didn't know Yiddish.
Oh, okay,
He
okay,
knew a couple of words because my mother spoke Yiddish to him, he
yeah,
learned some Yiddish
yeah,
from my mother. He,
yeah,
he understood a few words
yeah,
because my mother spoke Yiddish. No
yeah,
matter who was there, she spoke Yiddish, whether
yeah.
they understood it or not.
So when you came up here, you uh,
But we never spoke Yiddish to my kids.
you know,
They didn't. They never heard it. They didn't,
oh,
except That's not true.
Mm,
We were interested, and I sent my two boys to Yiddish school.
mm,
Yeah, uh, when we moved to Rockland County from
oh,
Buffalo. But they
mm,
learned a little bit, but not very much.
yeah.
And my oldest son, I don't know, but
Mm,
he understands Yiddish.
yeah.
Yeah, he understands it. Yeah,
So, so you
yeah.
went to when you came up here, you went to the JCC and discovered they had a Yiddish
Right.
conversation.
Because at the conference we had in San Diego, two people from the JCC group came to San Diego to
Oh,
the conference,
oh,
and one of them was Judy Kennedy,
oh,
uh, from the Yiddish group. uh, and I, as they were leaving the conference, when the conference ended, I kind of spotted them, and I started talking with them. Because I knew I was going to be moving up to the
yeah,
Bay Area. And
mm, yeah.
I
So,
asked her, oh, do you belong to a Yiddish group up in the
yeah,
Bay Area?
yeah,
And she said, yes, we do.
yeah,
So when I when I moved here, um, I already had a contact,
okay, okay,
and I
yeah,
knew to go to the JCC.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the Yiddish Conversation Group was at the JCC into what the COVID and uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Till COVID. Yeah.
is it-
Until COVID, and then we were kind of lost,
yeah,
you know. And so Dolores Tyler and Judy and me, and then Susan Cohen also went to the JCC, and even I got Sharon into it also because I met Sharon at at the Y at an exercise class.
mm,
I started talking with her, and I spotted her South African accent, and I knew South African Jews in San Diego,
mm,
and I knew that they spoke Yiddish.
mm.
So I so I got friendly with Sharon
Yeah,
Pincus, and I told her about our group in the JCC.
yeah,
So then she started going there too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what you also joined the Yiddish folk
yeah. And
lesson.
Judy was in the Yiddish folk
Oh,
chorus for many
oh,
years. And when I
okay.
came to the JCC and we started to get to know each other, and she started, she wanted me to join the chorus because I told her that I had, sung
Yeah,
in the Jewish folk chorus when I was young, a kid.
yeah,
I was like 18 years old or so. And my husband also sang with the adult chorus in New York. He was a better singer than me, but
yeah. So,
uh, uh, but
so
anyway, and she said, "Oh, come on, let's go to the chorus. You'll like it. You'll
yeah,
like it." And it was the first year that I brought my husband up, and he was still not he wasn't well yet.
yeah,
Wasn't He didn't come back to his senses. He did eventually from that anesthesia.
yeah,
Uh, but
yeah,
So I said,
yeah,
I can't leave him yet. And
yeah,
I was going every day to see him, in the
yeah,
facility that he was. And after that whole year, I said to I need a break,
yeah,
you know, I need to get away a little bit. And
yeah,
so I I went with Judy to the folk chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And
So,
now I'm on the board of the chorus. I
yeah.
yeah,
So, so what do you,
means a lot to me. Yeah, that's
yeah.
my whole
Oh,
my work. Yeah.
what do you like about speaking Yiddish?
It's very nostalgic. You
Mm,
know, it brings me back to my childhood days and my parents. You know, my especially my
mm,
mother. My mother was, she told me a lot of things about the old country and what life was
mm,
like there. And my
mm,
father was very quiet. He read a lot. He was more intellectual,
mm,
and uh, but didn't tell me very much about his life in
mm,
Europe. But my mother told me a lot, and
mm,
so I was,
yeah.
yeah.
Do, do you, outside of the folk chorus and the Mameloshn Mamas, are there other occasions now that you use Yiddish?
There are. There
Yeah.
are a number of, I belong to a number. The first group that I joined beside the JCC was, um, it's called Flissig Yiddish,
Mm,
and they used to get together once a month of people who are Flissig means fluent,
mm,
and you had to be a fluent speaker to be able to come to this group.
yeah.
And there were a few people in the JCC um, that also went, and we used to get together in people's homes too.
Mm,
And there were two women that led the group, uh,
mm,
and it was a very structured group because both of those people, they were teachers but structured it like a class almost.
yeah.
And but it's just once a month,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's a theme, and you get a topic and you have to speak on that topic
Yeah.
in Yiddish. You can't speak a word of English
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that group. So that's one group and then when the pandemic came, they went online. So we're still online, and I
Mm,
still belong to it.
yeah.
And then
Great.
there's another group, and this is more recent. Um, this guy, Fischl Kuttner, was a Yiddishist also, and he comes out of he used to organize the conferences, the Yiddish
Mm,
conferences, and also he was the head of the workmen's circle here in
mm,
the Bay Area.
mm,
His name is Fischl Kuttner, and he speaks Yiddish. He's very old now. He's into like 96 or so.
mm,
And
mm,
anyway, he used to put out this little newsletter called Der Bay or Der Bay, but it was in English, but about Yiddish activities. And but now this woman, her name is Asya Azenkot, and she speaks fluent Yiddish,
mm,
and she's originally from Lithuania, and she runs this Zoom Yiddish program
mm, mm.
where also no English. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the people on that Zoom program, there are people from all over the world. There are people from
Mm,
Russia, from Ukraine, from Italy, from uh, you know,
Mhm.
Germany, France, Yiddish speakers from all over
Mhm.
South Africa. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I, I have one final question.
yeah.
If your children or grandchildren ask you, why should I learn Yiddish? What would you tell them?
I would I would tell them first of all that's how I identify as being Jewish because I'm not religious. I mean, I grew up religious. I mean, my parents were religious, but
Yeah.
uh, we were not religious and we didn't raise our kids religious.
Yeah.
Although I did send my daughter to Hebrew school because when we lived in Buffalo, there were no secular Yiddish schools there. And I
Mhm.
wanted her to get some education about
Mhm.
being Jewish.
Yeah.
So she got a little more of a religious education.
Mhm.
We wanted our kids, to know that they're Jewish in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah.
And so, but
Well,
when we moved back to Rockland County, uh, my husband and I and some other Jewish people organized a Yiddish school there.
uh-huh. Uh,
And so they knew a little bit about Yiddish,
yeah. Yeah.
not very much. Yeah, yeah.
Well, well, that's I think that will close the interview. And
Okay.
I want to thank you for sharing part of your life, a
Yeah,
sliver of your life, I think.
there's a lot left out, believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, within the hour and a half here. And I
yeah,
really appreciate your, your participation in our project. And I think your life, as well as the other members of the Mameloshn Mamas, make a
yeah,
real contribution to Jewish identity and
yeah.
are
I'm gonna,
part of
yeah,
they're part of the mosaic of what Berkeley is. So,
yeah.
okay.
So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.